Ching, Hexagram number 59. Dispersion, dissolution, dissolve all hardening feelings. Dispersion refers to dissolving feelings and thoughts that lead to a rigid viewpoint, such as, I'll never do this again, or I'll never do that. I'll never again buy that. Such thoughts lead to giving people up as hopeless and incapable of changing. We experience such hardening thoughts when we have opened ourselves to others, only to find that they are less receptive than we anticipated. It is important to disperse or dissolve doubt, hurt feelings, or anger to return to an unstructured, innocent, independent attitude. It is important to disperse or dissolve doubt, hurt feelings, or anger to return to an unstructured, innocent, and independent attitude. Once our inner independence is restored, all will relate to us more sincerely. As an image, dispersion describes a technique of freeing ourselves. As an image, dispersion describes a technique of freeing ourselves from the grip of emotions. This technique entails letting go of feelings by allowing them to drift off on the wind, or to be washed clean by water. The active working water that is associated with effort. Through effort of will, we summon the strength to let go of all negative feelings and thoughts. Sun is also associated with gentleness, as in the gentle breezes. We disperse egotism through gentleness rather than through brusqueness. We are gentle with ourselves in spite of our errors, and we are gentle with others who suffer from their pressures of pride, alienation, and feelings of inferiority. The more guilty people feel, the more rigid and sensitive their pride systems become. Gentle perseverance dissolves the hardness and defensive rigidity that these pressures create. We also need to disperse feelings of hopelessness that would lead to breaking our ties to others. It is important to disperse the inferior element, whether it be doubt, fear of continuing to follow our path, anger, inner conflict such as, why are things this way? Or the temptation to lapse into indifference. This includes emotional reactions and frustrations about the defiances of ourselves or others. This line also refers to rigid feelings that we must do something when we feel pressured it means we are emotionally entangled. Forgive me, I will start that again. This line also refers to rigid feelings that we must do something. When we feel pressured, it means we are emotionally entangled. We need to step back, detach, and allow a new perception to break through. On realizing that we have made such mistakes, rather than lapsing into despair or self-flagellation, we should hold firmly to what is correct and wait. With this attitude, the harm will be corrected and the tension will dissolve, leaving no after effects. Dispersion also refers to dispersing our attachment to points of argument and to childish resistance to the way things work. We resist only because we misunderstand, or only partly understand. By giving up resistance, we make it possible for a full understanding to emerge. While it helps if we take the attitude that the sage knows how to make everything work, both the impossible and the unlikely, once we accept this possibility, the sage is free to bring about the impossible and the unlikely. Acceptance also enables the emergence of a larger insight into the problem. Changing line number 1. He brings help with the strength of a horse. This line counsels us to disperse and dissolve feelings of alienation. It also reminds us that the reason for alienation is misunderstanding. We should not overlook the possibility that we may be misunderstanding the sage or fate, such as when we think fate is hostile, or when we think people are impossible. In the process of self-development, we must go through difficulties that we later realize are absolutely necessary for growth. Changing line number 2. At the dissolution, he hurries to that which supports him. When other people do seemingly unforgivable things, we must try to discover in an unobstructed way how they have come to their point of view. If our final opinion is resentment, our understanding is still inadequate. That which supports us is a moderate and just judgment of men, linked with goodwill. We need to remember that people cling to false ideas as crutches, thinking they are unable to proceed with them. We must be patient and tolerant with such people. One of the great false ideas is hopelessness. A bad situation cannot work out, or a unity is impossible. Hopelessness is so foreign to our nature that we switch back to the hope that some last efforts will work, we seek to persuade others of our point of view. This failing, we fall back on a contrived indifference. When this has no effect, we attempt to force a solution. This failing, we engage in pleasure-seeking and diversions. Soon we make other forceful attempts. Each time we throw ourselves away more until the loss of self becomes dangerous. Each phase of hopelessness is built one on the other. At each stage, we damage our self-esteem and further increase the ego's power. To compensate, we build defenses through feelings of retribution and hardened pride. The more we have humiliated ourselves, the more our wounded pride can turn to hatred and violence, either in a suppressed form against ourselves or against those we see as having humiliated us. In such ways, people barricade themselves with packs and defensive walls and become isolated from any meaningful relationship with each other. We must keep in mind that the beginning of this vortex of the dark force has its roots in a negative assessment of people. The first ploy of our ego to doubt or to decide negatively about people is simply against our nature. The extent to which this vortex is carried out depends on the strength and persistence of our ego. A humble and moderate person will not regard difficult situations as impossible, nor will he take reversals as assaults to his pride. He will be able to accept it when mistakes have been made. He does not put himself in the place of God to decide the future, but he accepts the present. He allows others to go their way without giving them up as hopeless. In recognizing that a person has become stuck, not able to make progress in his self-development, we must not give up on him, but leave him to see things for himself. Meanwhile, we carry on with our lives. Changing line number 3. He dissolves his self. This line counsels us to relinquish the accumulated feelings that compromise. This line counsels us to relinquish the accumulated feelings that comprise our perception of ourselves. These feelings are mainly defensive. It is as if we always have our guard up, or we stand on a knoll looking down at others, presuming we alone know what is right. In defending ourselves, we may have condemned as hopeless those we are meant to rescue. In defending ourselves, we may have condemned as hopeless those we are meant to rescue. We need to dissolve these barriers and the negative feelings that support them, such as ill will, resentment, and alienation. We may also need to dissolve all ideas of how we want things to happen and allow the sage to do the job his way. We may need to realize that others are able to obtain the help of the sage, and that in and of themselves they are able to find the truth without our intervention. Only when we have dissolved the constructed self are we able to come to meet others halfway. Changing line number 4. He dissolves his bond with his group. We should not follow what our group does, what is customary, or what our friends or family think we ought to do. We should not follow what our group does, but what is conscientiously correct. Holding to our group also refers to when we sacrifice the long-term good to obtain short-term gains. Sometimes group refers to an abstract group of white knights in shining armor with which we identify ourselves. Our good group invariably opposes the bad group. We should avoid casting people into them as opposed to us, for such groups do not really exist. The rescue of one inevitably creates the rescue of another. To retreat from reacting to evil in others pulls them away from evil doing. To be clean and clear in ourselves is to create cleanliness and clarity in others. Another meaning of this line has to do with lessening our standards to accommodate those around us who are not behaving as they should. In this case, we should dissolve our bond with our group by reaffirming our own standards. Changing line number 5. Loud cries as dissolving as sweat. Loud cries as dissolving. Loud cries as dissolving as sweet. As sweat. Forgive me. Misunderstanding is swept away when we realize how well our goals are achieved through dispersion, allowing negative thoughts to dissipate. One such negative thought is to decide we are in a bad situation. It is a great and liberating idea to realize that it is not our responsibility to correct or save others through taking charge of situations, manipulating people, or making such efforts. Instead, we should disengage, let go, and leave matters to the sage and fate to correct. When we see this clearly, it is great relief from an enormous burden we were never meant to assume. A man in a ruling position refers to an idea so obviously true that anyone can follow it. to realize that through energetically correcting our ideas, we can correct and change our lives. This is a great and liberating idea. Changing line number 6. He dissolves his blood. This means to resist thinking about or bringing up subjects that invoke wounds or anger. It is important not to stir up the mud or the blood of bad thoughts. If we think about things that arouse feelings of alienation or doubt about a situation, we cannot relate to the situation correctly. We also endanger perseverance if we indulge in such thoughts. In dispersing these thoughts, we keep them at a distance and become free of doubt and alienation that fuel them. We should also stop reminding ourselves that someone is incapable of changing. We should also stop reminding ourselves that someone is incapable of changing, or that we have no way of bringing about changes. All people are capable of responding to what is high and good within themselves, and we cannot help them achieve these changes. We may realize how this is possible if we think of how a flock of pigeons flies. Such a flock may seem to whirl and turn synchronously, making it difficult to determine which is the lead pigeon. Considering that each pigeon beats its wings synchronously with the rest, and all of them speed up, dive, climb, or soar at exactly the same time, it would seem that the leader transmits his will to the whole by simply feeling a thing, being responsive. The others follow. The Ching teaches that human beings on the inner level relate in the same way. The more a person's attitude is in harmony with the cosmos, the more his will and perception subconsciously penetrate to others, affecting changes. For this reason, it is said in Breakthrough, Resoluteness, Hexagram 43, that it takes only one persevering person to make great improvements in the world. This ends Hexagram number 59.